You're listening to the Chasing Tails Outdoor Podcast, where when you can't be in the outdoors, we bring it to you. Welcome back to another episode of the Chasing Tails Outdoor Podcast. My name is Walt, and unfortunately Chase couldn't make this episode, so I'm flying solo. And to prevent you guys from hearing a lengthy intro from a halfling hobbit, I'm going to keep this simple. Thank you for tuning in. Today's episode is with Jason Griffin. He's a buddy of mine who has set his sights this past year to kill a big buck, and he made it happen utilizing small game seasons and feral hog seasons to find the sign that he needed. So with that, we are going to set a record for the world's shortest podcast, at least for Chasing Tails, and we're going to get you to the episode. I hope you enjoy. Jason Griffin, the legend of Southeast Georgia, dude. What's going on?
Yes, sir. Man. Lots going on, but it's all pretty boring stuff for the most part.
Yeah, man. I mean, here we sit as we record this. It's the tail end of January. Deer season has ended for you. The year is behind you. It's a year in review at this point. It's small game. It's getting ready for turkey season. Where's your mind at right now? I'm curious.
Right now, I'm kind of getting excited again about. So I have never done much turkey hunting, but I'm kind of getting excited again about trying to learn that this year. So
I got you.
That's kind of where I'm at with that, and then it's sort of just kind of being relaxed and just enjoying this time of year when I can just go out and shoot some squirrels and there's no pressure. Just have fun.
Yeah, for sure. So have you killed a turkey before?
I have not.
Oh man, you were in for a treat.
I have seen one gobbler while hunting, and he was too close to a road to shoot him.
Okay, I got you.
He was smart.
I think everybody who listens to this that turkey hunted went, "Yep, been there."
But yeah, and I've had some respond to calling a little bit, but I haven't been able to get one to commit yet. So
my best encounter to date with a hunting buddy is how I'll qualify this. Was right there near you on a WMA that I will not be foolish enough to name, but I guess you could say I tell people all the time, I didn't do very much turkey hunting when I was a kid. I didn't do intense turkey hunting, but most of it that I did was right there near you.
I got you. See, so when I moved down here, just driving the roads and the WMAs, I was amazed at how many turkeys I saw compared to, let's just say, a lot of other places I've been in. So, yeah, they're out there.
Oh yeah,
I just gotta figure out how to kill them.
That everybody's trying to figure that out, even the people who do it annually. Oh man, well, we're not here to talk turkey. We're gonna talk about a lot of things, but turkey isn't among them yet. I'm sure you and I will have some turkey story by the end of the time spring's over, but. You had a year that I got to witness kind of play-by-play. You have friends that kind of come into your life for different seasons, and you and I have got to know each other both in person, in the woods, and just in general. I mean, we have a lot of common interests, and it was very interesting watching you make the progression this year. Now, I don't say that, obviously, from being like a world-renowned deer hunter, right? Like, it wasn't like, oh, he finally did it. But it was interesting to see you set your sights on a goal and watch you take steps and then ultimately succeed, which is kind of the point of this podcast. I kind of want to tell everybody, I kind of want to share with everybody how you progressed this year, kind of what your background was as a hunter before, which we'll touch on in just a second. But I kind of want to, a lot of hard work went into this. There's a lot of background, and I think it uses some non-traditional means, and we'll get to that in a second, to finding deer success. So before we go down any of that path, I'm sure I've thoroughly confused everybody. Why don't you kind of tell everybody, what's your background in the outdoors?
Well, so for starters, nobody in my family hunted or fished growing up. So my background really goes to all the way when I was a kid and just being obsessed with the outdoors. Just catching frogs in the woods and anything I could do. I just spent most of my time outside, and I loved animals, wildlife, nature, everything. Basically, I was a huge nerd is what it comes down to. I mean, to the point where when I was a kid, I read the Travels of William Bartram, which was like a
Right.
3-inch thick book at the library, and basically then from there, I met a friend when I was about 8 years old that had a pond in his backyard, and they would bass fish out there, and caught my first bass on a plastic worm. And from there on out, I spent the next few years spending every penny and dime that I made as a kid on fishing lures, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Basically just kind of, camping, all that. And then as an adult, I'd always had a curiosity about hunting. Um, I had never seen anybody even so much as kill an animal, really. Like, I wasn't really sure how I would feel about it, but I was always real curious. And I'm trying to remember. I want to say the first time I went out was 2015, I think. So I actually had a family member who was not really a hunter, but had been hunting a few times. And he was like, "Yeah, I'll go with you," because it's just weird going out by yourself.
Yeah.
I didn't even know anybody that hunted, for that matter. So we went out to Oconee National Forest. We went out. We got there just a little bit after daylight. Saw all the trucks. We basically picked a spot that was between trucks that were parked on this dirt road. About a quarter of a mile either side, the dirt road. We didn't have anybody there. We walked in. Just during the morning, we just walked down this road and saw several deer, busted several deer that were probably just stirred up by all the hunting pressure. And we sat down, and I forget exactly what we did that day, how it went, but that evening, about 30 minutes before dark, 2 does stepped out, and shot one at about 25 yards, sitting on the ground with a 30-06, and that was it was fun. Like, I loved it. Tracking it, it didn't run very far, obviously, but everything about it, even skinning it, I loved all of it. So I kind of became obsessed. But the thing was, I still didn't have anybody really to hunt with. Didn't really know what I was doing. I lived at the time in North Georgia. There's not a lot of deer there, so I did not kill a deer I hunted one more year up there before I moved to where I live now in Southeast Georgia. Moved to Southeast Georgia, kind of went out a couple of times on some WMAs, killed a hog, but still didn't really know what I was doing. And when I say a couple times, I mean like maybe 2 or 3 mornings out of an entire year with no scouting involved. And it really wasn't until last year. I don't know what happened, but I just got to a point where I was determined that I was going to figure it out. And I started doing research, and I just started trying to talk to people, friending people on Facebook, and just trying to figure out how could I go out and consistently see and kill deer on public land. And one of the hardest parts about it was there is like most of the information on deer hunting does not apply to Southeast Georgia.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
true, unfortunately.
so even then, like with all the research I did, a lot of it, when I would get out in the woods and I'm scouting, I couldn't figure out how to actually apply any of it. But and then and really, I don't know. It kind of started to come together last year. Finally made some friends that hunt. My buddy Bronk, we spent a lot of time hunting together. So that helped too. That kind of helped motivate me, give somebody to bounce ideas off of. And that's pretty much how it all got started.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I grew up in Southeast Georgia. You're amply aware of that, and so are the listeners. And it was always so frustrating to me you'd get a new you get a new copy of Field and Stream, and it's how to use I don't know, mountain saddles to kill your next big buck, or how to use fence rows to your advantage, and it's like none of this applies, and to date there really isn't, and there probably won't be a conclusive, I guess, authority on hunting the coast, just because no one really cares about us, and what point would there be to somebody putting all the time and effort into teaching people how to hunt the East Coast, the Atlantic coast, when
Right, right. People aren't traveling to kill 110-inch, 4.5-year-old deer when it's
Right.
88 degrees and there's mosquitoes flying and there's an alligator looking at you from the creek.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. And the yellow flies are hauling you off. But it's just one of those things where it's something you just kind of have to figure out for yourself. And the sad thing for me was, as I left there in 2015, I really felt like I was coming into my own with regards to getting on deer and figuring them out, from literally hunting them in the salt marsh to the edges of palmetto transition lines and high stem count areas. It was really fun, as I left there, to feel like I'd done really well. And then on top of that, to be able to come back and hunt it with you this year, and manage to kill a deer in the span of 3 days, man, that really, I mean,
Yeah,
that was cool. Like, that really, it felt like I really validated myself that time. Of
that,
course, you were
that was
instrumental in
exciting.
that as well.
Yeah, that was exciting to see you do that. I don't even remember why I couldn't go out that last day or what happened. There's no telling. This year's been just one thing after another. But I was super happy to see you get one down. And on just on a trip like that, relatively short trip, out of town, public land, you hadn't really had a chance to scout it. I mean, that's just awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was basically 3 days worth of scouting, and then a little bit of luck mixed in there. I mean, it was. I don't know. It was kind of like a coming home party. I don't know if that's like the right way of going about it, but like, here I am in Florida, and oh, I used to kill deer back in Southeast Georgia. I used to kill deer back in Southeast Georgia, and everybody's like, okay, man, well, you can't kill anything in Florida, and then to go to go back and then get it done. I had people reach out and be like, okay, so I guess you weren't full of crap. I'm like, I mean, every place takes time. I mean,
It does.
unless you're in a place like Kansas, and I'm not dogging on Kansas hunters, but the vast majority, drive through the Midwest one time, the vast majority of the country is eliminated out there, and there's only, the creek bottoms are all that remain. So it's a little easier to get on deer.
Right, right.
But one of the things I think was interesting for me, observing you and getting to know you is, and this is, you actually influenced me to go in a similar direction this year, is you do a lot of ground hunting. Why don't you hunt from a tree stand more?
Uh, Originally, I started sort of a lot of the hunting I started doing was in the mountains, North Georgia,
Okay.
and it was very unsuccessful hunting. But there's not a lot of point in carrying a tree stand into open, mature hardwoods with steep terrain because you get all the way up to the top of a tree and look to your right and 40 feet to the right is the ground right there. It's the
Right.
same level you're at.
Right. Yeah.
So there just wasn't really a point to do it. Another reason, and this goes back to kind of the the nerdiness of my background, but um, to me, like a lot of the fun of hunting is the challenge of just being able to have the bare minimum that you need. This is also part of why I've only used trail cameras a little bit because even though it's fun to get the pictures, I kind of like the idea of just using my skills to kill something as opposed to using equipment. And it has nothing to do with thinking I'm better or I don't care what other people do. It's more fun to me that way. Um, so that's a little bit of it. Also, to be honest with you, the cost is a little bit of it. I try to keep costs relatively low, and it's just one of the first things I felt like I didn't really need was a tree stand. There are certainly places I have found more so living here in Southeast Georgia than other places where you really do almost need one. Um, but the other thing I figured out was because most people hunt with a tree stand, there's also certain parts of a WMA that people aren't hunting because it's hard to hunt from a tree stand, just as well as vice versa. There's areas that I can't very easily hunt because I don't have one. At this point, I've pulled one deer from a tree stand, and shortly thereafter sold it. So
It's funny you mentioned that because you told me that. I was going to bring it up if you didn't. You said that to me. Man, I don't know. It was not. deep into the September, you were like, oh, there's places that people don't go because you can't hunt from a tree stand. I'm like, man, that's crap. Like there's no. And then I started thinking, I'm like, man, all those pine flats with those young pine trees where you can see underneath them. But oh, dude, those thickets and the palmettos. I started thinking about it, and I ultimately killed my Georgia deer this year hunting from the ground. And in fact, on that piece of property, it was super conducive because of all the burning that they had done in there and all the clear cutting that they had done on these WMA areas. There weren't a whole lot of suitable trees, and a lot of times I'm like, man, there's this trail here, this trail here, this trail here, a lot of cover for the deer to be moving. There isn't a suitable tree. Just hunt from the ground. And man, I really got. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, I'll be honest with everybody. My pack was a lot lighter.
Yeah,
I mean, the weight component of it, and
a big part too of I am like extremely mobile. Like I move around constantly. I cannot sit still. And it occurred to me like you've got an entire side of the country where people are hunting deer and elk and pretty much everything without a stand. Um, if you can get close to a deer and draw and shoot it with a bow when there's very little cover around you out in the middle of the desert or wherever else, then why on earth could I not do it when the cover is so thick you can't hardly see 15 yards, you know? Um, it's just people have been convinced that most people are convinced of two things that they need it for scent. They want to get their scent up high and to not be seen. Well, the being seen aspect of it does take some practice. If you're going to draw on a deer while you're sitting on the ground, yeah, you have to put some thought into where is he looking? Is his head behind a tree? Whatever, having cover. Um, and for me, most of my practice with that has come from hunting hogs. Um, and then at the same time with the scent, I mean, I know that's a very it's one of those topics everybody has their opinions on, but I mean, in Southeast Georgia where the wind is constantly swirling, I don't use scent control and I generally hunt from the ground. And I almost never get busted wind wise. It's almost like because I have just convinced myself it doesn't matter that the deer just don't care. I know that's not how that works. I know people are going to say, well, a mature buck is going to be different, and I'm sure there's definitely truth to that. Um, but it's not as you know, and because I'm hunting from the ground, like if the wind is in my face and the wind switches, and which happens all the time, and I believe the deer are bedding or feeding in an area or coming from a certain direction, I can just get up and walk 20 yards and find another spot to sit. Um,
yeah, I did that a lot this past year. A whole heck of a lot. The mobility component of it was nice because a lot of times, I think I said this on the last podcast. I may not. My memory isn't what it once was. I'm now 31, but it's one of those things where if you're set up in a tree stand and you've put all this time into it, especially if you factor in the camera gear that I tote, you put all this this effort into a stand, you're like, man, I don't want to tear all this down and go somewhere else. When in reality, maybe you should get down. Like if your gut's telling you to get down, maybe you're not in the right spot. You should. And with the rifle from the ground, I didn't take a stool. I took my backpack and that was my gun rest. And like that was it. That was the extent of what I did. And a lot of times, man, I'd bounce over to a spot and be like, oh wow, there's a lot of fresh sign here. Let me hang out for a little bit. And I was able to kill that deer in Georgia because I bounced around for the span of, off and on this weekend, that weekend, for the better part of 2 months. And the scent component to it, man, I my philosophy on it is this. I use a lot of merino wool. I wear wool boxers, wool base layer, and if it's cool enough, a wool bottom. And I don't stink as much. And if I don't stink as much, I'm certain it's making some difference to the animal. And if anything, it's a mental difference, right? Like it's in my head. But it used to be, you could smell your balls, and it's like, dude, the wind's in my face. How's that possible? It's so hot.
well,
Um,
one thing I've noticed, one thing too is, most of the season I'm covered in DEET. Like you could like the thermocells help. Don't get me wrong, but when the mosquitoes are bad, it is not enough. So I just spray myself down. I don't even think about it. Now, the one thing I have noticed is I think the scent that I'm leaving in an area and the way that puts pressure on the deer to not come back through that same spot has way more of a difference than the scent I'm putting off while I'm actually sitting there the first time in. Like I've noticed a huge difference in how many deer I see if I go back to the same spot that I was at. If I hunt a feed tree and I try to hunt it again the next day, almost never see anything. But um, and I'm sure that if I could decrease my scent, it would probably help a lot with that aspect of it. But being that it's often 85, 90 degrees and high humidity, I can't worry about it.
Yeah,
It's just not a luxury I have.
Zach Fehrenball one time said it best, and he said you pick one condition that works good for you, and then you use that condition. It's never going to be scent control for me. Not this far south. It's just never going to happen. I also don't believe in it. But I even had John Eberhart come on the podcast, and he said, dude, if I lived in Florida, I wouldn't worry about scent control either. Like there's just no way you'd die. But I think what's really interesting to me about what you did is you shot a lot of smaller deer. You really had your eyes set on an older deer, right? A more mature deer. And I don't think you really cared what that looked like. It could have been a deer coming out of his prime with a 40-inch rack. I think you would have shot him if he looked old. And I don't blame you. I'm an
For
equal
sure.
opportunity. Huh?
I said, yeah, I don't want to say that I was going to pass up a whole lot of deer because I'm still fairly early in my hunting, so I'm not exactly picky, but I definitely like I actually so I'd had several encounters with bucks, even one really really good buck before last year, but last year was actually the first buck I ever shot. So that was a 2.5-year-old on clay hole. That was the first buck I ever shot. Now I saw probably 130-inch or so buck. Um, the second time I ever went hunting on Oconee National Forest, totally screwed it up. Didn't shoot him and didn't see a buck for a long time after that. So
Right, right. Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
but yeah. So no, I wasn't necessarily in it to pass up a whole lot of deer, but I was definitely had my eyes set on something. Um, you know, at least 3.5.
Right.
Honestly, pretty much at least 3.5 is what I really wanted.
For sure. So one of the things I saw you do, and this is what sparked all of this conversation. This past weekend, we were on a WMA near you, and we were pig hunting. Had a dang good time of it. It was a total freaking debacle. I'm gonna have my little brother on the show here soon, and we're gonna detail the debacle that this past
Yeah.
weekend was, which it was unreal. But in the end, we got on a bunch of pigs, had a really good time, and one of the things that I just it shocks me that it's just not part of my radar because I even proved it to myself last year, and that is getting in the woods after deer season, utilizing small game season because the woods look like they do during the wintertime. They're easier to navigate. First off, squirrel and rice makes a fine stew. I mean, it's good meal, but you learn so much, dude. You and I were finding fresh scrapes I think maybe you said last weekend, but I found a fresh brand new monstrous scrape, and the October is 4 months, or the rut was in October, 4 or 5 months past. And there's buck sign everywhere in this thicket. And I'm looking at Duncan. I said, dude, we're going to do this every year. And he goes, well, I hope so. I said, no, no, no. I don't give a darn about the hanging out with you thing. I just want to know what the deer were doing this past year. And he died laughing.
I mean, we did. We found rubs and scrapes. So we found rubs that were no more than a few days old, and we mentioned we jumped two bucks out. One of the bucks had already lost an antler. So I'm thinking to myself, like, they're already starting to drop antlers, and we're still finding rubs. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can't explain it, but it was there, and the scrapes too. We found maybe two maybe scrapes that were relatively fresh, and we had just gotten through a lot of rain, so by
It was
fresh we had
fresh,
to
fresh. Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that was interesting to me though was the fact that you basically did that when the early season that you did. I mean, you did a lot of pig hunting. You did a lot of small game, and I feel like you learned from. And correct me if I'm wrong. I felt like I saw an evolution with you, or a understanding of this WMA through utilizing those small game seasons. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong at all. So, the WMA is a fairly, new to me, WMA. Um, I had never, let's see, the May hog season I'm pretty sure that was the first time. I think I had driven through it before then. The first time I put boots on the ground was in May on the hog hunt after turkey season. So me and a couple buddies spent 2, 3 days. I guess it was 2 days, and we covered probably 20 miles. I don't know. We covered a lot of miles, just walking, just looking for hogs. But anytime I'm in the woods, if I'm in a so I work for a pest control company. If I'm doing pest control, I'm looking at deer droppings and tracks in people's yards. Like I'm like, people will say they see a buck in their yard. I'm looking for beds in the bushes behind their yard. I mean, there's no point. It's just I can't help it. I'm always looking. So I mean, I've seen rubs, on the side of the road while I'm driving down the road before in some of these neighborhoods. I'm just like,
Yeah.
so, but yeah. So I'm always looking for sign, and we did, man. We learned a lot just walking. I mean, because I had started to figure out a couple of other WMAs. I started to figure out some patterns where deer were bedding and hanging out during the day, and just as I'm starting to figure out, I decide to go to a new WMA. And probably not generally the wisest decision. In this case, it worked out, but I pretty much put all my time into this WMA. All the scouting I did in the summertime. Um, One thing we did that was kind of cool, because I've never really thought to do this in Georgia on public land, but we went out 2 weekends before the season opener with binoculars in the evening and glass deer in like some fresh cutovers and stuff. Um, I've watched people glass bucks in the Midwest out in these, ag fields and stuff, and I thought, well, maybe that'll work here in these clear cuts. The deer go out there and feed, and I was shocked. I mean, me and my buddy started walking through a clear cut that goes way back off the road, and we made it about halfway back, and I'm just glassing the side of it, and then all of a sudden there's a buck with his head looking over some palmettos just looking at me, and I was like, oh, this actually works. And that actually led to finding the first place in that WMA that I really hunted, that I ended up killing a doe and just missing an opportunity at a buck. But it was actually because of glassing that I even found it.
I, I think unconventional thinking pays off enough. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you try something crazy every day, but
Right.
but I mean, sitting in the cool of the truck, maybe turning the AC on here and there and glassing is something that I do even here on power lines, just to simply inventory deer.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
And they're a whole different animal before the season starts. I mean, they just are. As soon as the hunting pressure hits on
oh,
opening
sure,
day,
sure.
but they're not going to move far from where you saw them. I mean, if on September 5th he's in a clear cut, at 7 o'clock in the evening before it gets dark, then on September 12th he's close to there.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
but
I think it changes based on what their range is. Here in Florida, it's not uncommon to get a picture of a deer on one camera and then another a mile away. I mean, like legitimately a mile away. And
that's crazy. Yeah.
I think that just goes back to the habitat in these two places isn't even comparable. Largely,
Right.
I mean, the
Right.
food where we were. I mean, there every squirrel we shot and every pig we were on was eating water oaks. I mean, there's the amount of the food load there was different. What was it like hunting with these expectations from the ground on a WMA that you hadn't hunted before? Did you have to change anything up? Did you ever kind of doubt what you were holding out for?
Uh, I'm always doubting.
Fair, me too.
Uh, yeah, and if anything, I probably overthink things. Um, so, but it's weird because I say that at the same time, I'm actually really quite confident, so I can't really explain that. But no, for me, what I had learned really before coming to hunt this WMA about Southeast Georgia, pretty much if someone was to ask me like what's a pattern that how do you, if I could put into one sentence, how to kill deer in Southeast Georgia, it's water oaks. I mean, almost every time I've ever hunted over water oaks, I've seen. I mean, they will. Live oaks are good too. Don't get me wrong. There's times when they're really good too, but the most consistent thing has been water oaks. You still have to have thick cover. You still have to get away from hunting pressure. All of those same things, but it's just starting around late September or so, there are water oak trees that will drop from around late September all the way through December, and as long as the acorns are on the ground, the deer are going to eat them. It's incredible. So the funny thing about it is there's not nearly as many water oaks on this particular property as some of the other WMAs that I hunt. But back in September, so I should probably start here because during archery season, before archery season scouting, I had found, I glassed up a buck. I mentioned he was looking out of palmettos. So there was a big palmetto thicket on the edge of a clear cut that was probably, I would say 10 acres, 5 acres, something like that. There was a few oaks in the palmetto thicket, but immediately to the right of that was a little flat of water oaks. There was a fresh clear cut. On the other side of the water oak was a cane thicket, and on the back side of it was really thick young pine trees, and that was actually private property. So it was just sort of like a little opening of water oaks surrounded by clear cut palmettos, river cane, and thick pines. And there was historical rubs going all through it. So immediately I knew, I was like, this is a good, and this was back in sometime around Labor Day, and there was 2 fresh scrapes. So I immediately put a camera, and I decided, I was like, I know this is going to be a good spot. I don't want to come back through here. Like, if I can help it, I don't want to walk back through here at all. I don't think anyone's else is going to come back here just because it was an overlooked spot. To be honest, it was not really hard to get to, but just you wouldn't think. Just most guys just wouldn't think to walk there. It's the easiest way I can explain it. So I also knew that I wanted to wait till it was the rut, until the acorns were dropping. I didn't want to hunt it until then. So I backed off of that and waited until October. So, I mean, I had not been back in there at all. First cold front in October. I was like, all right, this is the time to go, right? So I get off work a little bit earlier than usual. I think I got off work at 4 o'clock. And get out there. So by the time I go home, get my stuff, drive out there, it's about 5 o'clock. I start walking through. So I'm using the clear cut to get to it, because during the day there's not going to be deer in the clear cut. Right? I'm gonna walk straight through the clear cut, and once I hit the woods, I only have to walk about 10 yards, and I'm where I'm going to hunt. Wouldn't you know, there's a doe feeding in the middle of the clear cut when I walk out. All right. Well, in my head, I thought, well, this is a good sign. I'm not going to even worry about it, right? So I get to the clear cut. I'm being real sneaky. So I walk in real quiet, real slow. Even when I get to the last 50 yards of the clear cut, I mean, I'm walking as quiet as I can. Mm-hmm. Slip into the woods. I look to my left, and there's a buck standing there pawing a scrape right where I was going to hunt.
God.
We stared at each other. I couldn't actually see his rack that well because there was a lot of brush there, thick brush. But we just stared at each other for a couple of minutes. Finally, he got nervous and he bounded off. Thought, well, I'm here, right? So I'm gonna climb a tree. This was the one time I was using a climber, so I got up in my climber and sat there, and ended up having 3 does come in and feed that evening, and I got one. So it was a good day, but it was fun to do everything right and have it almost work out and see it work, even though I didn't come home with the
Sure.
buck of the hunt,
Sure.
you know. Um, and I think the most important thing I did was not go back into that spot. I knew there was going to be deer there. I knew there was going to be rutting activity there. I didn't care to know all the details of the spot, because if I learned all of that, I felt like I was going to mess it up. As soon as that happened, though, I didn't hunt it again. I mean, I hunted, so I only hunted 1, 2, 3 days during archery season. Not 3 full days either. 1 full day and 2 evening sits on that WMA. All I did as far as hunting goes. And then the rifle hunt, the 3 days of the rifle hunt. So
Not a
I
whole lot
spent
of not a whole lot of time invested.
no, and I honestly, so this is the other thing is I don't get a lot of time to hunt. It's just I probably hunt about 10 or 12 days out of a season the last 2 years. I spent 2 days bear hunting in North Georgia this year. Very close to bring home bear, but did not. I do small game hunting. I'm out there in the summertime. Looking for snakes. I do that. I get out there in the middle of the summer at night with a flashlight. I've actually checked game cameras that way before, at night with a flashlight. Just, kids are asleep in bed, whatever.
Yeah.
I got a few hours. I'll go out there till about midnight, walk around.
That's when you do your herping.
Yeah, I do that. I've seen some hogs at night like that. It's pretty exciting, I gotta say. So usually I'm with somebody, but I have done it alone as well. So I try to spend a lot of time out there, but I'm not actually putting that much time into hunting, and it's not necessarily because I don't want to, but it's just I have a limited amount of time. So my focus, or what my goal is, generally speaking, is to try to at least see deer every hunt. If I see deer, I know I'm doing something right. And if I don't see any deer, I am mad.
Right.
Like, I
Aren't we all?
yeah. Like, I feel like I'm unreasonably mad. I'm
Gotcha.
just
Okay.
like,
Okay. Okay.
there's like, everybody knows there's going to be days you don't see deer, but if I don't see deer, I messed up. I did something wrong in my mind. Um, so pretty much that's what I did, though, is that I spent a lot of time hog hunting, small game hunting, finding different spots, and then just sort of jumping around from spot to spot. And it got really interesting when we got to the rifle hunt. So 3-day rifle hunt in December. The rut, of course, in Southeast Georgia is like early October. So, 2 months past the rut. We had spent a lot of time scouting an area that was different from where we had hunted during archery season. And it was kind of interesting because when we talked to the biologist, he said, you know what? He said, let me tell you where I would hunt. I was like, all right, I'm thinking, why is he telling me this, But he had run camera surveys out there, and he's like, I'll tell you where I would hunt. And he told me, and it was the exact spot that we had scouted to hunt. All right.
Wow.
He said there are 5 unique mature bucks in that spot I had on my cameras. So I was like, all right, well, that's a good sign, right? So we got there first morning of the hunt. I didn't get there quite as early as I wanted to. That's sort of a long story, but there was somebody already in there hunting. I'm not going to go into all the details. There was some drama around this person that was out there hunting. They had their sign posted saying that there was 5 of them hunting back there.
Wait, was it flag and tape?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh God, he was a Florida hunter, guaranteed.
Yeah. So, well, no, unfortunately, he was not. But
he was from Florida, guaranteed. He may have had Georgia tags, but that is a Florida thing.
But so point being, it ended up that he was hunting that exact spot we had scouted and planned on hunting.
Wow.
So already, plan A is basically out the window. Not only because Not just because like we couldn't hunt because he was there, but because he was essentially messing up the spot, if that makes sense. I mean, they dragging stands in and out and all that. So, and they were hunting, the same spot over and over. Now, uh, we did end up shooting a doe within a couple hundred yards of them, and they got mad and yelled at us that we cut off the deer and all that. So, um, I was just sort of like, I don't care. I'll just go somewhere else. I'll figure it out. I'm not
Yeah.
worried about it.
Yeah.
So, so from that point, our 3 day hunt that we had scouted for, kind of turned into, now we're scouting during the hunt, right?
Right.
Which I don't mind doing that. Honestly, I almost like scouting better than hunting sometimes. So from there, but here's the interesting thing about it. So we immediately found some really good buck sign. Um, when you're scouting during a hunt, though, a lot of times you find, you walk through the area to find the sign. And now at this point, you just walk through the area. So how are you going to go and hunt it, right? So there's always that balance of you want to scout enough to find the hot deer sign and hunt it, but not so much so that you're just running all the deer out.
Right.
So it was working to a degree. Like we were seeing a lot of does. I watched a buck chasing does. But it seemed like with each sit we were seeing less and less deer, and we were kind of getting frustrated because just
Put a lot of
we
time into
knew,
it. You have limited time, and when it doesn't,
yeah.
I mean, it gets frustrating quick.
And I mean, this is December, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but we had funerals and we had
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of stuff going on during hunting season. So this is December, and I had killed one deer and hunted all of maybe 6 days, right? So
Right.
I'm thinking like I need to get it done now,
Yeah. Yeah.
So so anyway, we Saturday morning we were trying to decide like the last day. We decided we were just going to go somewhere totally different. Um, we had basically map scouted an area on Google that looked really, really good that we wanted to check out. So we were like, we're just going to get out there in the morning and just go see what we can find, right? Come to find out, that whole area, and I mean, we walked a couple of miles. I mean, the whole area was freshly lawn. Looked totally different than what it looked like on the map. So we walked the road and looked for tracks in the road, and very few fresh tracks at all. So we just decided, like, all right, this is not working. So at this point, we're at Plan C. It is like 8 o'clock in the morning on the last day of the hunt, and you know, we had both shot a doe already. Um, so there's a 2 deer limit on this hunt. So we're just trying to figure out, the spot we knew had good bucks that we wanted to hunt. We can't hunt there. The other spots we had found, we felt like we'd kind of just boogered them up in trying to find them. So I said, all right, I've got one last idea. And I knew an area that I had seen back in September that was just loaded with water oaks. And that's really the extent of it. We pretty much were going in blind. I had never really scouted it really good, but I knew there was a bunch of water oaks, and I knew there was a particular crossing. I don't want to say anything that gives it away, but there's essentially a terrain feature due west of that. I had seen one time I had been in there. I'd seen a lot of does crossing in this one particular spot. So I had an idea of where that was. I was like, we're just going to go to that spot and we're going to see what it looks like. Because this has been a couple of months, but if the water oaks are there, there's going to be deer there. And I'm trying to think. So maybe a few hundred yards from there on opening day of archery, I had jumped what I believe was a pretty good buck, walking out in the middle of the day. So, it wasn't anything real specific. Like, it wasn't like I had a pattern figured out or anything, but I knew there were some nice bucks in the area. Oh yeah, and another thing that happened was in the summer we had glassed a bachelor group of mature 8 points in the clear cut adjacent to this. So again, we knew there was bucks in the area. We didn't know exactly where. We knew we were there. We knew there was a food source there. We knew there was water oaks, and there's cover everywhere in this WMA. Literally everywhere. I mean, you know that. So
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
so 8 o'clock in the morning, we go walking in. Um, basically, yeah, basically as soon as we got to the spot, like when we got within view of this particular doe crossing where I had seen does in the past, like we didn't even sit down. We didn't even find, like we just walked into the area. It came within view, and a buck steps out from behind a little thicket of bushes there. So, and it was, let's see, it was, I think we figured out it was about 140 yards or so. And I mean, we're just standing in the open hardwoods, like no cover between us and this buck, and he's looking our way. Okay. So I'm standing there with my rifle, like, all right, so I've got to figure out how to shoot this buck now. I don't have time to move to a tree to use as a rest. If I get down on my pack, he's going to see me and run. Like, got to do this now. So, um, thankfully, I'm actually pretty good at offhand shots. I like doing it. It's fun. It's something you should practice for sure. So I took an offhand shot and got him right in the heart. Um, but it wasn't over then. So I knew I'd hit the buck. He ran. We got down to the spot where he was, and there was no blood. No fur, no blood, nothing. We walked back and forth for, I don't know how long, a pretty good while, just looking and looking for blood, looking for fur. Couldn't find anything. Interesting side note, on the second pass, we realized there was an eastern diamondback rattlesnake curled up on the ground we'd probably stepped over. It was a little bit cold, so it wasn't really like moving or rattling or anything. It was kind of just sitting there. I don't think it would have bit me if I'd have stepped on it, but I wasn't particularly upset about it, but it's always a little bit weird to know that it was there and you didn't know it was there. Anyway, so eventually I said, look, I got to just go. I'm just going to follow the direction that he went, and I'm going to look for him. And we stepped it off. He was 50 yards from where I shot, on his side, dead in the middle of the woods. Walked up on him. The shot was right behind the leg, right in the heart. And there wasn't even blood next to him. Now, mind you, this is a 308.
Yeah.
The shoulder, the leg bone on the back side of him was completely broken into. I cannot explain it. It makes no sense at all. But, I'm happy about it, obviously. He's a really nice, the biologist said he was 3.5. He did have a really long tine that was broken. But he's a really nice buck, right at about 100 inches, which, as you know, for Southeast Georgia is no slouch. For comparison, for listeners that don't know,
It's a huge
the
deer.
county that I live in, the officially listed record is like 129 for a typical, and the county next to it, and this WMA is on the border of the two counties, is like maybe 139 is like their official record, I think, something like that.
I think the county north of that WMA actually has a 150 on the books, but
but it's a non-typical.
right, but
So
it was also an imported deer way back in the day from Wisconsin, and so it's not like it was representative of what's in the area per se.
I know that a 130-inch typical in this county would be the county record. I know that, but the point is that you go 2-3 counties west of where I am, and there's 170-inch deer. Like, it's that dramatic of a difference.
Yeah. So, no, it is for sure.
And that's not to say nobody's ever killed bigger deer and they just haven't put it on the books.
Exactly. Yeah.
100% sure that's happened, but point being, they're pretty small here. Um, so that was my goal. Like, it's funny because my goal really was to shoot a 100-inch deer, and there's no particular reason for that particular goal, and it's not like it's not like I'm really worried about inches, but it was just a nice even number that was just easy to set as a goal, you know. So um, it really worked out. I was happy about that. But I'm still learning so much about these WMAs, about hunting here, but the pattern continues for me. The last year on opening day, feeding under some water oaks, I saw a buck that was pretty similar in size. Archery, he was about 60, 80 yards out. I tried to crawl up to him on the ground and basically ran out of light. So kind of got stuck at a tree that was falling over, and I really couldn't get any closer to him. And then right at the end of shooting light, my phone started to buzz, and he kind of lifted his head up and then slowly walked
Oh man.
but I would not have been comfortable even close to making that shot distance at that time. I would getting closer now, but I mean I wanted it to be 30 yards or in for sure. Um, and I was probably at least twice that. So, but point is, water oaks, thick cover, heavy cover. If you can find those two things, and there's not a lot of people hunting the spot, it's going to be money in this part of Georgia every time.
Yeah. I mean, it was a hell of a season for you. That's a hellaciously good deer. I mean, it is safe to say that you could probably hunt there another 15 years and maybe not shoot another deer that nice. Um,
It's possible. But I'm telling you right now, my goal next year is bigger.
yeah, well, of course, of course. It's all always is. There's always an
Right?
escalation.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and frankly, they are there if you're willing to put in the time and the effort. And I think the purpose of this podcast is to say that there are more than one ways to skin a cat. And one of the things you can do is take advantage of these off-season small game hunts and go small game hunting. Because here's the deal: when you're creeping through the woods slowly for rabbit or squirrel or pig, you're moving slow enough you're going to sneak up on deer too. I see deer all the time doing this. And when you're slowing down like that, you're seeing more than when you're speed scouting or you're just looking for deer signs. So I encourage everyone, if your goal is to do something extraordinary in the woods or just be better in the outdoors, I really feel like taking advantage of small game season, both on the front end and the tail end, can really pay some serious dividends.
Yep. It's and practice skills that you might not would think about, tracking, um scout. When you find a buck, you say you see a buck or you find some really good buck sign and you want to try to backtrack to where he's coming from. um you know Practicing tracking, you can practice it with hogs. You can practice just in the off season, just pick a set of tracks and just try to follow them as long as you can.
Yeah.
um there's all kinds of things you can do. You see a deer and you just so a lot of the hunting I do would be officially called still hunting, and by that I don't mean sitting still and hunting, but walking through the woods very slowly and quietly. um this is pretty much what I do almost all the time, whether I'm scouting or whether I'm hunting, which I'm almost always hunting because in Georgia, small game, you can hunt hogs
Mm-hmm.
most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
um but then even during deer season, so you know you go in, you hunt in the morning. um Everybody gets up, leaves the woods. um Pretty much have the woods to yourself during the middle
Mm-hmm.
of the day, especially early season when it's hot, especially archery season. You pretty much have the woods to yourself. So you can go somewhere that you haven't scouted, that you're not planning on hunting, so you're not messing up your spot. Go somewhere completely different and just go pick an edge and just walk it. And just, if you see deer, try to stalk them. I mean, you know, opening day of archery season this year, middle of the day, my buddy almost shot a doe at about 15 yards, and it didn't quite come together, but practice. That's how
Right.
you get better. I mean, just being out there and learning to read sign, and I mean, it's hard to even. There's just so much that you can learn. Shooting hogs with a bow. Hogs are a really unique challenge. They never sit still for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
If you're stalking. Hogs are definitely easier to stalk than deer. Would never say that they're not, but there's liable to be 15 of them. So you don't just have to watch one set of eyes and ears and nose. You got to watch all of them. Because if
Mm-hmm.
one of them sees you and squeals and runs, they're all gone. They're all busting out of there. So learning how to get close to them without getting seen, without them smelling you, and then being able to actually get a shot when they are constantly moving and back and forth, and they're 30 yards 1 minute, and they're 40 yards the next minute, and they're 25 yards the next, and just they're turning around, and their heads down, and they're just constantly moving. Anyhow, hogs are much harder to shoot with a bow than deer are.
Right.
Now, they're not harder to find, they're not harder to get close to, but when it comes down to the actual shot, they are significantly more difficult to shoot. So again, excellent practice. Another thing about hogs, just for anybody that's looking for hogs, I see people on Facebook posting all the time, where can I go to find hogs? And people will tell them what WMA, or they'll say there's hogs in all the WMAs, which is kind of true. But the main thing is thick cover. And when hogs are sleeping in the middle of the day, you can literally walk 10 feet past them. I have had them blow up right underneath my feet. I mean, they will wait till the last second. And I don't know if it's on purpose or if it's just because when hogs are sleeping, they sleep hard. But whatever it is, they when they're bedded, they will. And I've figured out deer will do the same thing too. But point is, if the hogs are there, they're going to be in the middle of the day. They're going to be thick, nasty cover, briars, whatever else. And if you're not finding them, they're probably there. It's probably just that you're walking past them. So you're walking through the easy to walk part, and then and they're over there in the middle of that big patch of palmettos, or the blackberries, or whatever it is. So but yeah, go out, find them, and when you're looking for them, you're going to find deer sign. You're going to jump deer. This past weekend, we're looking for hogs, right? What do we do? Jump 2 bucks. I know right where they were bedded.
Yeah.
Of course, this is Southeast Georgia. I don't know how much that means. They probably bedded somewhere different the next night, but still, you learn the area that way. So
yeah.
It's I would definitely say, though, I spend more time hog hunting than probably anything else. So this year, me and Bronk, we hunt together a lot. We've killed, let me think, like 9. We killed 4 on last year on January 1st. I missed a couple during turkey season with my bow. Then we killed on that Ceylon hunt. We killed the 3 of us together, I want to say we killed 9, I think. Maybe more than that. I forget. Somewhere 9, 10, 11, something like that in 2 days. Then during deer season, I killed a couple with my bow. He killed a couple. Then he killed another one with his bow. And then, I don't know. So we killed quite a few of them is what I'm getting at. And a lot more that we missed. Recently when we went hunting, the last time we went hunting, I got into 2 groups of hogs. The second group of hogs was in a really is on a different WMA, really overgrown. It was sort of like an overgrown clear cut, but it was very swampy. Like if you imagine a swamp getting clear cut and then it growing back. So it was very thick and very muddy, and there would be these random live oak trees on like little islands in the middle of this huge clear cut. It's really unusual looking. It actually even unusual for this area. But point is, we got on a group of hogs, and I followed them for about 150 yards. And when I followed them, I mean they're going through the brush, rooting and all of that. and I didn't have a shot because the cover was too thick. And so, I mean, I'm crawling on my hands and knees through the tunnels that they're running on, and I just literally just shadowed them until they got to this oak tree, and they kind of then finally started to sort of settle into one spot and feed. Long story short, I ended up shooting, and I'm pretty sure I hit a branch or something, but that's how it goes. But you know, it's fun, but it's a lot of practice. And what did we find when we got in all that stuff? Buck sign everywhere, huge tracks. I mean, so that's just you just got to get in the woods and figure it out. I mean, bottom line. So
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you taking time to hop on the phone and tell your story. And I'm eager to get you back on the phone, hopefully after turkey season or maybe after a hog hunt coming up here soon. Maybe
yeah,
we can plan
we
another one.
we need to have another one that works out a little better.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna work out some of the kinks that will be
Yeah.
disclosed in a future podcast, and once those kinks are worked out, I am supremely confident that hogs will die. Um, and at that point in time, this will be not a concern. We'll be talking about how much died. In fact, I sent an email to somebody who can hopefully get an answer on some questions for us. So, but guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you enjoy hearing from people like Jason, and you like hearing myself babble on well beyond the confines of what's a good monologue. Tell somebody about the podcast. That's how we grow. We appreciate it via word of mouth. That's how everybody finds out about the podcast. But no matter what you do, find time this week to get outside and enjoy the great outdoors.